but then a song that comes along which goes, girls who like boys who dig girls who like boys who dig girls who like boys who love girls who like boys who dig girls who like boys who love girls who like boys, always need to love someone. No. If that appeals to the mentality of a human being, then that's sad.
We'd frankly need an entire video to cover the Blur-Oasis feud properly, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. Though Liam and Damon Albarn would be seen playing footy against one another during the 90s, there's a reason this is one of the most infamous musical beefs of all time. In the mid-90s, the UK underwent a cultural revolution known as Cool Britannia, helping signal the rise of Britpop. Though Suede and Pulp both round out the genre's quote-unquote Big Four, the two biggest bands to come out of Britpop were and are London's Blur and Manchester's Oasis. Not only did they hail from opposite ends of England, but Oasis embodied a meat and potatoes working class rock and roll mentality, in contrast to the wealthier Blur's more intellectual genre fluid style. As Britpop became a cultural phenomenon, both bands started taking casual shots at each other. Noel claims both Damon and Liam were sleeping with the same woman, though Liam has denied this. Blur cleaned up at the 1995 Brit Awards by winning 4 trophies, with Albarn saying this after winning Best British Group.
I think this should have been shared with Oasis.
Afterward, Liam allegedly taunted Albarn at an event celebrating Oasis's single Some Might Say topping the UK charts. Liam bragging right in Damon's face about getting to #1 caused Damon to take that as a challenge. In the summer of '95, Oasis's single Roll With It was scheduled for release a week before Blur's single Country House.
You gotta roll with it, you gotta take it some. You in a house, very big house in the country.
Since Oasis releasing their single a week earlier likely meant better odds of them keeping the top spot for another week, Blur moved their single's release date up to set the stage for a UK chart battle for the ages.
Two of Britain's most popular pop groups have begun the biggest chart war in 30 years.
The head-to-head fight between the two bands for Britpop supremacy took up just as much, if not more, oxygen in the British press than other much more pressing news items at that time, something the NME themselves acknowledged back then, quote, "Yes, in a week where news leaked that Saddam Hussein was preparing nuclear weapons, everyday folks were still getting slaughtered in Bosnia, and Mike Tyson was making his comeback, tabloids and broadsheets alike went Britpop crazy." Oasis might have sold more records in the long term, but on August 20th, 1995, Blur were officially crowned victors of the singles battle. Despite Oasis being the bookies' favorites to win, Blur's single sold 58,000 more copies, with bassist Alex James adding insult to injury by wearing an Oasis shirt during their appearance that week on Top of the Pops. The rivalry was far from dead though, as Oasis's sophomore album What's the Story Morning Glory would not only reach massive commercial heights, but they'd win 3 awards at the following year's Brits while their rivals from London were shut out entirely. Liam, Noel and co. then took the stage to accept the award for Best British Album while mocking one of Blur's biggest songs.
I'd like to thank all the people.
Oh,
People, so many people, and they walk your hand in hands through their life.
Noel would also draw extreme controversy while interviewed by The Observer during the previous year for saying he wished Albarn and James would both, quote, catch AIDS and die. Remarks he apologized for soon thereafter, blaming his heavy drug use while saying it. But he's also passed judgment on every single member of Blur. Quote, Damon Albarn is a knobber, and his guitarist, who I thought was alright, seems to think that he's some intelligent superhuman being, the idiot. I never met the drummer, and the bassist, who I first didn't like and thought he was a turned out to be quite alright. Ultimately, neither Country House nor Roll With It was among either Blur or Oasis's strongest work, and the Britpop craze would prove to be fairly short-lived. But even the Blur-Oasis feud is one whose wounds have mostly healed with time, as Noel and Damon are now friends and have collaborated musically on several occasions, notably on the 2017 Gorillaz track We Got the Power.
We got the power to be loving each other no matter what.
As for Liam, well,
but I'm a creep.
Noel Gallagher has his issues with Radiohead. That much is obvious. As it seems, Radiohead have their issues with Oasis too. Much like their rivalry with Blur, Oasis were the street-smart, working-class, bombastic counterpoint to the higher-class, university-educated, artsy, meticulous Radiohead. Back in 1995, frontman Thom Yorke had this to say about Oasis and their fans. "They're a joke, aren't they? It's just lots of middle-class people applauding a bunch of guys who act stupid and write really primitive music. Then people say, oh, it's so honest." That wouldn't be the last time he'd rip on Oasis before the Gallaghers joined in on the fight. Yorke had a habit of mockingly covering Wonderwall during Radiohead shows around that time.
Today is gonna be the day that you're going run back to you.
While in Canada, he covered it during a 1996 appearance on the CBC.
Said maybe.
Is this abysmal or what?
Yeah.
Okay. It's always good to make fun of Oasis, though, so.
They don't mind actually.
Of course, given how the Gallaghers have spent their entire lives wanting to be rich and famous and living the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle, they don't have much respect for bands who aren't making huge, euphoric, important-sounding music born from good times and excessive partying. Quote, "Radiohead don't want anyone else involved in that little thing they've got going on. Their thing is, don't look at us, don't photo us, don't interview us. In fact, don't listen to our music." Where does it end? It ends with Thom Yorke saying, "I've written the most fantastic piece of classical music ever, but the only way you can hear it is by jamming a jack plug into my ear." They seem so pissed off being in a band. That doesn't inspire kids to pick up guitars. They're moaning about the marketing, the videos. If I was 15, I'd think, I'll get a job down the car wash. Whereas us, we love it. It's the best job in the world. Granted, some of the stuff on Amnesiac is brilliant. The Bends is the bollocks. Karma Police is mega. But they don't want people to like their music, so they can go f themselves. More pointedly, Noel said this in another interview that same year.
It's like, well, if you don't enjoy it, retire, do us all a favour, you know, and go and live in a mansion in Oxford so we don't have to listen to your miserable bleatings about how your life is.
Even as recently as 2015, Noel expressed his discontent for how much love Radiohead gets from critics. "I'm aware that Radiohead have never had a bad review. I reckon if Thom Yorke shit into a light bulb and started blowing it like an empty beer bottle, it'd probably get 9 out of 10 in Mojo. I'm aware of that." In that same interview, he added, "Technically, there's better songwriters than I am. Guardian writers will tell you that. Have other people's songs ever really touched a generation, though? Radiohead, when do people listen to them? Is it when they go out, or is it when they come in? Because I'm struggling to think. Look, as soon as Thom Yorke writes a song as good as Mony Mony, give us a shout. Sorry, Noel, but joke's on you. Thom Yorke could write Mony Mony in his sleep, but neither Tommy James nor Billy Idol could ever write Paranoid Android." Noel's most famous shot at Radiohead, however, came in 2007 in reference to Thom Yorke's debut solo album, The Eraser. Thom Yorke sat at a piano saying, "This is f***ed up," for half an hour. "We all know that, Mr. Yorke. Who wants to sing the news? No matter how much you sit there twiddling going, we're all doomed, at the end of the day, people will always want to hear you play Creep. Get over it." This, of course, references Radiohead's reluctance to play their 1993 breakthrough single live, a song that's light years removed from the band Radiohead would eventually become. Noel also threw shade at his own pal Bono in the same breath during that interview, saying, quote, "It's the same with you too. Play one. Shut the f*** up about Africa." Back to Radiohead though. The Guardian reported Noel is also saying, quote, "I never went to university. I don't know what a paintbrush is. I never went to art school." Tom, who has usually not responded to the Gallaghers' remarks despite drawing first blood in the mid-90s, replied with a short, sweet, smart-ass retort. "I did. It taught me to respect other artists." A smidge hypocritical there, Tom, but kudos for a very slick comeback. Liam has little time for Radiohead himself, as he once lumped both them and their more accessible descendants Coldplay into the same category of bands he not only doesn't like, but whose fans he hates. Quote, "I've mellowed, but not in the sense of liking Radiohead or Coldplay. I don't hate them. I don't wish they had accidents. I think their fans are boring and ugly and don't look like they're having a good time." Liam's dislike of Radiohead even extends to the Oxford Five Pieces' choice of musical themes, specifically on 2011's The King of Limbs. "I heard that f***ing Radiohead record and I just go, what? I like to think that what we do well. Them writing a song about a tree? Give me a break. A 1,000-year-old tree? Go yourself. You'd have thought he'd have written a song about a modern tree or one that was planted last week. You know what I mean?
Think twice.
Noel's hatred of Phil Collins, an artist who has sold twice as many records as Oasis, knows no bounds, and their disdain toward each other dates back decades. Mind you, it was Noel who did most of the talking at first. Things more or less began in the 90s, as Noel once said this about when Oasis first started.
If we're going to get rid of Phil Collins and Sting, junk food music, McDonald's music, we've got to get in the charts and stamp them out.
Do you know what I mean? I want the severed head of Phil Collins in my fridge by the end of this decade, and if I haven't, I'll be a failure.
That would hardly be the last of it, as Noel went on to hurl insults at the former drummer of Genesis on multiple occasions over the years, even dubbing him the Antichrist. Some of his more memorable quotes include, "People hate cunts like Phil Collins, and if they don't, they should. You don't have to be great to be successful. Look at Phil Collins."
Phil Collins knows he can't say anything about me because I'm the But this is the thing, though. Well, that's the thing that does his head in, and the fact that he's bald.
Even if Noel is a cantankerous, anti-woke boomer nowadays, I'll mention that again later, he's mocked Phil Collins, who isn't even a conservative, for moving from the UK to Switzerland after Tony Blair's Labour Party was elected in 1997. 8 years later, during another UK election cycle, Noel encouraged the public to vote Labour to keep Collins from moving back home.
If that's not a reason to vote Labour at the next election, then I what is.
As it were, Blair was re-elected and Collins stayed in Switzerland.
Yeah, well, he was quoting something that was said way, way back. Everybody assumes that I'm a conservative, see, because I've got a lot of money. But I'm not a conservative at all, never have been.
But why does Noel hate Phil Collins so obsessively, you ask? It's because he claims Collins' 1982 cover of the Supremes' You Can't Hurry Love got to #1 on the UK charts while simultaneously keeping one of Noel's favorite bands, The Jam, off the top spot.
Can't hurry love. No, you'll just have to wait. Come on, boy. Come on, girl. Succumb to the
Quote, "I thought, once I get there, I'm not going to let him get away with that." Plot twist, he's actually misremembering things, as The Jam were nowhere close to #1 in either of the 2 weeks You Can't Hurry Love was atop the British charts. Weeks earlier, however, The Jam's single Beat Surrender stalled at #2 on the UK singles chart behind Save Your Love by Renee and Renato, the latter of which would be knocked off by You Can't Hurry Love. That's right, folks. Noel's long-held grudge against Phil Collins is rooted in a false memory. In 2005, Collins finally clapped back at the Gallaghers on the BBC show Room 101, saying,
They're just horrible. They're just horrible. Horrible guys. They're rude, not as talented as they think they are. Well, they actually, I mean, I won't mince words here, but I mean, they've had a go at me personally.
Since then, Noel has claimed Collins' kids have confronted Liam in person about Noel's insults aimed at their father, not realizing they were mixing the two brothers up. Quote, "The best thing about the Phil Collins thing is that Liam got accosted by his children one day because they thought he was me. They had a pop at him saying, 'Why are you always having a go at our dad?' When I heard about it, I thought, I really hope someone filmed it. Anyway, Liam and Phil Collins and all."
I got my mind set on you. I got my...
They say never meet your heroes. In this case, it's because you never know what they might think of you and your music. Such is the case with the late Beatle George Harrison, who seemed to have beef with Oasis for several reasons. Back in 1996, as Oasis were riding high off What's the Story Morning Glory, Mr. Here Comes the Sun had this to say about the band his old band inspired. "The one who writes the songs, Noel, he is okay, but they don't have that much depth. The other bloke, he is just pain. I don't think they need him. The one who writes the songs, he can sing them just as well, you know. Maybe because it's his brother, he's got to keep him in the band."
He's like a bit out of date. You know, I mean, he's a bit of a... It's just silly. It's silly. I feel a bit sorry for him, really, because I think he's totally missed the bus. And I think it was proven when you see the band without him singing. You know, they're more in tune, and they can... You know, I mean, he's just excess baggage, I think. And all he does is, you know, make people think what a bunch of prannies they are.
While George's quote was likely brought on by Noel claiming Oasis were bigger than the Beatles, a boast he made whilst high, the boys, especially Liam, were predictably annoyed by George's comments, with Noel mostly going the diplomatic route and Liam literally choosing violence. Quote, "If any of them old farts have got a problem with me, then they should leave their Zimmer frames at home and I'll hold them up with a good right hook."
I still love the Beatles and I still love George Harrison as a songwriter in the Beatles, but as a person, I think he's a fucking nipple. And if I ever meet him, I'll tell him. And if you're watching it, nipple.
Considering he was never the most popular Beatle, George saying all of this feels rooted in some degree of bitterness and sour grapes. This is all while saying nothing of the fact that Wonderwall's title was ripped directly from Harrison's 1968 debut solo album Wonderwall Music, which itself was the soundtrack to the psychedelic film Wonderwall. In fact, the success of Oasis's Wonderwall inspired the movie Wonderwall's director Joe Masso to re-release the film. 2 years later, though, Liam hurled more vitriol in Harrison's direction. "All these old farts, slagging us off, they'll be dead and buried by the time we start getting senile and shitting in our pants. And we can remember all their shit tunes. I've got my mind set on you, When We Was Fab. The quicker they go, the better for everyone. Anyway, John and Ringo were the Beatles. Isn't it a pity? It will be when I meet George Harrison. I'm gonna stand on his head and play golf." Noel has also had some choice words for Paul McCartney, who once branded Oasis as, quote, derivative. Specifically, Noel hit out at Sir Paul's music since at least the late 70s, which he declared as manure back in 2002, while adding that rock stars don't make important material after 30.
I don't wanna rock, DJ.
It's an honour and a pleasure to introduce the next band. They are the band of the people. They are Oasis.
When two Northern Englishmen make it big, you'd expect there to be some camaraderie between them both. But the brothers Gallagher have never been exactly fond of Robbie Williams, who came up through Oasis's fellow Mancunians, the boy band Take That. The war of words between Williams and the Gallaghers dates as far back as 1995, which begins with Robbie actually becoming friends with Liam when the two met at that year's Glastonbury festival. But then Noel decided to fat shame Robbie one day and things got real awkward. Robbie has since gone to extreme lengths to keep the back and forth with the Gallaghers going. This isn't helped by the fact that Liam married and later divorced Robbie's ex-fiancée, Nicole Appleton of the girl group All Saints. Things truly kicked off between them when Oasis sold out 2 nights at Nebworth, 2 of their most famous concerts ever, before Robbie one-upped them by selling out 3 straight nights there. To kick the Gallaghers while they were down, Robbie mailed Noel a pair of tap dancing shoes with a message that read, quote, "Dear Mr. N. Gallagher, you said 2 nights at Nebworth is history. Well, I guess 3 is just greedy. Yours, Rob. P.S. Finding it difficult to find adequate support for my show. What are you doing on the 1st and 2nd? Oh, and the 3rd. Not exactly gracious winner behavior there, Robbie." In 2000, Robbie challenged Liam to a fight on stage at that year's Brit Awards.
Liam, 100 grand of your money, 100 grand of my money. We'll get in the ring and we'll have a fight and you can all watch it on TV. What do you think about that?
They'd face each other again later that year at the Q Awards, where the verbal sparring continued.
And I'm just gonna keep me gob shut.
Noel has gotten all kinds of shots in at Robbie too, making some especially derogatory comments about his music. I think Robbie is a very, very misguided, easily led, stupid, foolish young individual who definitely benefit from a slapping. I'd probably kick him down the stairs a couple of times, not that I'm a violent person. I think he needs to be held down by people in white coats and slapped around the face for half an hour. Robbie's the biggest fake ever, and yet he thinks he's Elvis. In 2006, he made these remarks about Robbie after his album Rude Box was snubbed for nominations at the Brits. As he tends to refer to himself in the third person, Robbie Williams is obviously a character that he's invented, and the music he makes is dog shit. And I think even Robbie would probably agree with that. During an interview with Zane Lowe 2 years ago, Robbie claimed the Gallaghers were, quote, gigantic bullies, even though he still loves their music.
And also, you know, is like they were gigantic bullies too, to like the whole industry, everybody in it. Yeah. And I didn't like that. Yeah. And a lot of that still remains inside me. They're probably different people now, but there's a lot of me that's like, they're bullies, them.
Yeah.
I don't like bullies.
Yeah.
Liam then responded with this. I agree with him on the vital thing, not on the bully thing. I've never bullied anyone in my life. I'm a massive piss taker for sure, and probably gone a little too far sometimes, but if I've ever hurt anyone's feelings, I apologize. Liam also tweeted this when Robbie's father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Oi, Robbie Balboa, it's LG. I hear you got shit going down in your fam. I'm sorry to hear that. Love and light going out to your family. Stay cool and in tune, LG. Robbie responded saying, brother, that means a lot to me. Carry on being celestial. The world needs you. Your fan, Rob. Most recently, however, Robbie hurled more insults at the Gallaghers during a performance at London's Hyde Park, making fun of Noel's height by patting a cardboard cutout of him on the head on stage. But he has also said this about Oasis's reunion announcement. The soap opera alone will either be exciting and or ghoulish to watch. As for the shows, they're gonna be incredible, off-the-scale special. Oasis getting back together is going to be a healing moment for our country.
If you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends.
Here's an example of both brothers attacking their opponents in different instances while being hit back with equal intensity both times. Things started when Liam was quoted as saying he would smack the Spice Girls if he bumped into them at the 1997 Brit Awards, hence why he wouldn't be attending. Wow, that was a yikes look for Liam. But much like Robbie Williams 3 years later, the group's resident Liverpool native Melanie Chisholm, aka Mel C or Sporty Spice, hit Liam with some of that northern spirit during an acceptance speech at the Brits after beating Oasis in that category.
I just want to say, Liam, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
Once the Spice Girls fame became utterly all-encompassing, Noel took some shots at the group and what he perceived as them prioritizing their marketing game over their music.
I like them as characters. I think it Sporty Spice. It's got good voice, man, I tell you, for a white chick. But I'm not into all this, you know. They're just a big money-making corporate machine, aren't they? You know, advertising crisps and cans of Coke and all that nonsense. They've got a single out now that you can only buy if you buy 20 cans of Pepsi. You know what I mean?
He doubled down on this while at that year's Capitol Awards. And of course, guess which Spice Girl clowned on him in response?
Did anybody notice how Noel Gallagher ran out after he said that? He ran. What's going on?
Nonetheless, Liam seems to have patched things up with the Spice Girls in the years since, as they were seen partying together after they both performed at the 2012 Olympics closing ceremony. Oasis's fellow Northerners, the Kaiser Chiefs, have been viewed rather contemptuously by Noel specifically over the years. He once said this about the lead's five-piece when asked about why he thinks they're, quote, wankers. The worst thing about them is that they're not very good. They play dress up and sit on top of an apex of meaninglessness. They don't mean anything to anybody apart from their ugly girlfriends. That's far from the only harsh thing he said about the band. Just listen to what he had to say on the Chris Moyle show on BBC Radio 1 back in 2008.
I've got news for you. The Monkeys have split up, son. You got to get over it.
The Monkeys haven't
on.
split up. They're just going under the name of the Kaiser Chiefs. I mean, I've done drugs for 18 years, 365 days in a row for 18 years. I never got that bad that would go, you know what? I think the Kaiser Chiefs are brilliant.
Liam doesn't have much respect for them either. Not only did he brand them as, quote, a bad blur to the enemy in 2005, he's actually feuded with the Kaiser Chiefs as recently as 2019, when keyboardist Nick Baines criticized Liam on Twitter for dropping out of a festival in Romania they were both playing. Liam responded a little more than a week later in typical Liam fashion. This one's for the flap out of the Kaiser Chiefs. All that money you spend on props, i.e. your daft-looking head, I'd spend on getting yourself a decent tour manager who spots these kinds of things. Otherwise, you and your band will be going for an early bath. P.S. It's naff like you that give leads a bad name. As for the Kaiser Chiefs themselves, they're either amused or annoyed depending on which member you ask. Frontman Ricky Wilson said this about Oasis's refusal to show up at the Brit Awards in 2006. It's daft as they aren't going to the Brits because they didn't get lots of nominations. They probably think they've been snubbed, but they haven't. Usually nothing scares Oasis. They're like rock bears. We are just rock hyenas or meerkats. On the whole though, the band aren't that fazed by the brothers' criticism, says drummer Nick Hodgson. We're definitely not offended, but I do actually like it. I think it's a bit of sport. It is funny though, because it does happen every single time they put out an album. And the last 2 albums, it's been us. The closest the Kaiser Chiefs have come to turning it into a proper beef though is when guitarist Andrew White said in 2009 that the entire thing was, quote, nasty, and that he'd previously respected the Gallaghers greatly. Quote, "We have no time for him at all. Music is an art, but unfortunately he doesn't appreciate music for what it is. Noel started it out of the blue and it's really unfair because we haven't said anything at all. It just shows what a bitter old man he has become."
Don't ask me.
During the 80s and early 90s, Australia's INXS were a force to be reckoned with. But by 1996, when Oasis were still riding high off of What's the Story Morning Glory, INXS were about 6 years removed from their last big hit. Oasis's rapid ascent to fame in the 90s was defined by the feeling that a ragtag group of young guys were taking over the world and turning the music industry on its head, and that the old guard better step the hell away while they're coming through. They made this abundantly clear during the Brit Awards in 1996 when they won British Video of the Year, presented by INXS frontman Michael Hutchence. During their speech, Noel, who was tweaked out on ecstasy in that moment, wasted no time punching below the belt for literally no reason.
Has-beens shouldn't present awards to gonna-bees.
A hurtful and totally inappropriate remark, no doubt, but there's deeper context here. Backstage at the 1995 MTV Europe Music Awards, Liam and Hutchence had allegedly nearly gotten into a fist fight. There were rumors of an altercation backstage involving a fire extinguisher, though it's not totally clear who was wielding it. Part of this was because Liam's then-girlfriend, Patsy Kensit, had been photographed getting, shall we say, handsy with Hutchence after presenting an award together. But the main subject of their reported tiff was apparently Paula Yates, who had been seeing Hutchence occasionally for years and left her husband Bob Geldof to be with him, but while also developing a crush on Liam in the mid-90s and hitting on him at an after-party while still married to Geldof. At the 96 Brit Awards ceremony, Liam seemed to joke about Hutchence's desire to fight him.
Well, for one, right, I heard Michael's gonna give me a slap right in the face, so come on.
But Liam also allegedly made some snarky comments to Hutchence about Yates, and a great deal of verbal sparring and threats ensued between the two. They also reportedly had a spat in a pub in Dublin, Ireland, where Hutchence was writing songs for the next INXS album, and with Bono in their company trying to diffuse tensions between the two. Noel has said his off-the-cuff cheap shot was partly fueled by being compelled to respond to tabloid reports of Hutchence threatening to fight his brother, as well as the band wanting to take opportunities to insult people in case the Brits never invite them back. Quote, "We didn't know Michael Hutchence was going to present us with an award. It was the first award of the night and there'd been words said before the ceremony in the papers. So when he came out to present the award, we went, right, these c***s have stitched us up here because they know what's going on. So we decided that every time we hit that stage, we were just gonna give it to everyone, and we duly did. Rock and roll is about doing what you want, when you want to do it, and the consequences." Hutchence was nonetheless believed to have been extremely hurt by Noel calling him a has-been, and decided to clap back at Oasis through song on INXS's 1997 single, Elegantly Wasted. The song's backing vocal can very much be heard as singing "I'm better than Oasis," a lyric Hutchence added.
The next day, we got to the studio and I saw Michael and said, hey, buddy. I go, hey, how's it going? And he just, his head just dropped. It was like the air. And I was like, come on, man, you can't give a shit about that. You know, but it did. It hurt him. It hurt.
Clearly, Noel's insult had an impact on Hutchence, whose personality is believed to have been affected by him suffering a brain injury in 1995. Hutchence ultimately died in November 1997, with Paula Yates passing 3 years later. His death was ruled a suicide, but some believe it was simply an accidental overdose. Regardless, assuming he had taken his own life, some have wondered if Noel's comments influenced Hutchence's decision. But ultimately, that's oversimplifying things. Neither Gallagher has spoken much about their feud with him since, though Noel, whose remarks made Hutchence feel humiliated according to those close to him, did say this to Uncut magazine in 2000. It wasn't scripted or anything like that. We probably wouldn't have done anything if Michael Hutchence hadn't come out and said his little bit, "I heard Liam wants to fight me." We were like, don't try and pick a fight with us, man, because we're the best at giving verbal abuse. And off we went. Now this is a juicy one. Following the success of Bloc Party's near-perfect debut album Silent Alarm, both Gallagher brothers got their word in on the four-piece, with Noel calling them, quote, appalling and indie shit, while Liam compared Bloc Party to a band you'd expect to see on the British quiz show University Challenge. Then again, Liam has never had much time for students, having once labeled Coldplay as such. More specifically, Liam had this to say about Bloc Party. Fair play to them, they're having a go, doing what they're doing and all that, and people seem to be into them. People ask me these questions like, are they the new Oasis, new Blur, the new thing? I couldn't give a I don't like them. I don't want to fight them. I don't want their f***ing birds. I don't want to shoot their dogs. I don't want to stand on their hamster's head. I'm just not into their music. But Noel said this in 2006, criticizing how the members of Bloc Party think about music. A band that constantly describes music as interesting makes me sick to my stomach. Every time I read an interview by them, it's like they're talking about their favorite music. Yeah, I heard a Bjork B-side that was interesting. It's either good or it's bad, so it either makes sense to your brain or it doesn't. There's no such thing as interesting. I've never sat down and listened to a record and gone and analyzed it that much that I was interested. It's like, put it on and within 2 minutes you're going, it's rubbish, turn it off, or stick it on again. But the most vicious insults came from Bloc Party's frontman Kelly O'Carrickey in a 2007 interview with Uncut magazine. When asked whether Oasis deserved to win the award for outstanding contribution to music at that year's Brits, Kelly said, quote, absolutely not. I think Oasis are the most overrated and pernicious band of all time. They have had a totally negative and dangerous impact upon the state of British music. They have made stupidity hip. They claim to be inspired by the Beatles, but, and this so saddens me, they have failed to grasp that the Beatles were about constant change and evolution. Oasis are repetitive Luddites. Kelly added this about both the University Challenge insult and Liam's overall mentality. It probably would have been a lot more funny had he not used exactly the same words to describe Travis a couple of years ago. Having said that, it's probably a very sad indication of the state of his mind. The idea that your ambitions shouldn't extend beyond getting pissed and watching the football really irks me. It's this idea that to be authentically working class, you need to be untainted by the airy-fairy ephemera of education, and it seems to be pretty unique to this country. Things didn't end there, as 2 years later, on the night when Oasis imploded hours before their headlining set at the 2009 Rock en Seine festival in Paris, and broke up for what appeared to be for good. While Bloc Party were playing right before them and delivered the news to the crowd, Kelly still felt a need to get the last laugh, and boy did he ever.
Oh, Oasis are cancelled. So I'd like to take this moment to say, oh, that's a shame, isn't it, guys? So I guess by default, we are headlining. I'd like to dedicate this next song to anyone that really, really wanted to see those inbred twins.
Noel Gallagher isn't exactly a big fan of change. He's complained in recent years about quote-unquote wokeness, the existence of gender-neutral pronouns or non-binary people, the idea of respecting Sam Smith's pronouns, mask and vaccine mandates, the Me Too movement. But he's also clearly not a fan of evolving musical climates, festival lineups included. I already explained Noel's disdain for rap music in part 1, but when you come for Jay-Z, you cannot ever afford to miss. And Noel absolutely absolutely skied it. In 2008, as Oasis were prepping the release of their 7th and final album, Dig Out Your Soul, Noel had some choice words about the news that Jay-Z was slated to headline Glastonbury, the first hip-hop artist to ever do so. The decision to have Jay headline was a controversial one and had been scapegoated for the festival not selling out quickly enough that year. Speaking to the BBC, Noel looked back in anger at Glastonbury's decision. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you start to break it, then people aren't going to go. I'm sorry, but Jay-Z? No chance. Glastonbury has a tradition of guitar music, and even when they throw the odd curveball in on a Sunday night, you go, Kylie Minogue? I don't know about it, but I'm not having hip-hop at Glastonbury. No way. No. It's wrong. To say nothing of the fact that Kylie caught an absolute stray there, saying a rapper shouldn't be considered for headliner status over guitar bands sounds about white. And unfortunately, when looking up social media comments around that time, it seems like a whole lot of Brits shared Noel's close-mindedness. Glastonbury organizer Emily Evis defended booking Jay-Z, pointing out that the fest had booked Cypress Hill, The Roots, and De La Soul in past years. She also agrees with me about the covert racism part. Quote, "There is also an interesting undercurrent in the suggestion that a black US hip-hop artist shouldn't be playing in front of what many perceive to be a white middle-class audience. I'm not sure what to call it, at least not in public, but this is something that causes me some disquiet." Noel also felt a need to clarify his stance on rap music, claiming he went to the Def Jam tour in Manchester during the 80s and that he loved Public Enemy back when rap was, quote, inspirational. Needless to say, Hove responded to Noel in kind both before his set and during it. While interviewed by Radio 1, Jay-Z dismissed Noel's attempted gatekeeping as, quote, ridiculous, adding that, if we don't embrace what is new, then how do we progress? It's 2008, what is that about? That's such old school thinking. That's not even how the world thinks anymore. He also said this before the festival. When someone makes a judgment like that, they are kind of ignorant. Yeah, I've heard Noel's music, but I've never seen him or Oasis play, so I can't say whether his show is rubbish. Until I see him perform, I can't really give an opinion of him, but I don't think he has ever seen me perform. I should send him a ticket. Jay claimed in a separate interview that rap had paid its dues enough to deserve such an honor from the festival. We don't play guitars, Noel, but hip-hop has put in its work like any other form of music. This headline show is just a natural progression. Rap music is still evolving. From Africa Bambaataa DJing in the Bronx and Run DMC going platinum to Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince winning the first rap Grammy, I'm just next in the line. We have to respect each other's genre of music and move forward. Still looking to get the last laugh, Jay got a hold of the interview where Noel made those comments so he could have them blaring out as he walked on stage, something the elder Gallagher brothers scoffed at. Blaring out? I doubt it very much. There aren't enough speakers. Well, I guess it'll make the first 5 minutes interesting. Once Jay finally took to the Pyramid stage for his headlining set, which sold out in the end, he hit everyone in the crowd with not only an audio replay of Noel's comments, but he'd then say, anyway, here's Wonderwall. Noel found Jay's response to be quite amusing, telling Blender in 2008 that it was pretty funny, but I'm not sure one should be seen in public with a white Stratocaster. Nonetheless, Jay wasn't done taking shots at Noel, referencing both him and the Glasto controversy in his track Jockin' Jay-Z.
That bloke from Oasis said I couldn't play guitar. Somebody should have told him I'm a rock star.
I actually like the guy, you know what I mean? I like his music, it's just...
Ultimately, Noel doesn't seem too fussed about the whole situation, telling the NME his comments about the Brooklyn rapper were, quote, misrepresented. I wasn't saying I was better than Jay-Z as a person or rock was greater than hip-hop as a thing or whatever it is. I said what I said and it was wrong or it was taken wrong and now all this. My single went back in the charts, Jay-Z's profile went through the roof. Everyone's a winner. He knows that I was misrepresented as I guess he was, so let's move on. For my own part, I can sit here and say I never dissed that guy. I never would. But there's no point in going on about it. I'll have a beer with him one day and it'll all be fine. Here's hoping they still plan on getting that pint.
I was asked, as you well know, my opinion about ticket sales at Glastonbury. And that's my opinion. And that's the end of it.
We love to see older Manchester bands supporting the youngsters. Neither Liam nor Noel had any love for Matty Healy's spiritual forefather, Michael Hutchence, so it's not surprising they don't have much for the 1975 frontman either. But in retrospect, who knows if Matty might have indirectly helped the Gallaghers bury the hatchet. During an interview in Toronto on the CBC's Q with Tom Power in February 2023, the famously divisive Healy said this about the fighting Gallagher brothers, while also introducing the world to a Northern English specific word for being a petulant douchebag to someone.
Like Oasis, tell you what, you can put this in. What are Oasis doing? Can you imagine being in, potentially, right now, still, the coolest band in the world, and not doing it because you're in a mard with your brother? Stop marding. Grow up. Headline Glastonbury.
Have a good time.
Have a good time.
Yeah.
Have a laugh. There's not one kid, there is not one person going to a High Flying Birds gig or a Liam Gallagher gig that would not rather be at an Oasis gig. There is not one person that's there going, you know what? I loved Definitely Maybe, but my favourite thing is fucking Noel Gallagher's High Flying. Do me a favour. Get back together, stop messing around.
Liam's response to those remarks on his Twitter account was pretty tame, but snarky nonetheless. As for Noel, simply hearing Healy's name must fill him with seething, irrepressible rage, as he called him a f***ing slack-jawed f***wit in an interview with Spin before even being told what he'd said about him. When the interviewer gave him a portion of Healy's quote, Noel said, he would never be able to imagine it. He needs to go over how shit his band is and split up. In response, Healy had one hell of a comeback for Noel during a concert in Dublin, Ireland.
Noel Gallagher called me a slack-jawed The difference between me and Noel is that I do like a series of kind of interviews to promote an album, whereas he does an album to promote a series of interviews.
Noel has been very dismissive of the 1975's music in other interviews too, as later that year, he went off on the idea of the band being classified as rock music. Oasis's influence, I think, was for people to fucking start a band in the first place. I do meet loads of guys who say that, and that's great. There are a lot of them around, it's just a pity guitar music has become marginalized. You've either got to be rock or that fucking 1975. At the Brits, the 1975 won Best Rock or some fucking shit. I was watching it with my kids, two teenage lads, thinking, is it me being a grumpy old man or is this shit? They were both going, oh no, this is fucking shit. The 1975 Best Rock Band? Someone needs to redefine that immediately because that is, I don't know what that is, but it's certainly not fucking rock. Whatever rock is, that's not it. Regardless of Noel's hair splitting over what real rock music is, Healy's remarks clearly got both brothers' attention, as the terms marred and marding are region-specific in the UK and familiar to his fellow Northerners like the Gallaghers. The online virality of Healy's rant also likely boosted public attention and interest in both a musical reunion and a ceasefire between the two brothers. The bitter irony, perhaps for Noel at least, is that he and Liam reunited within about 18 months of Healy's plea for a truce. Coincidence? The jury's still out. But love him or hate him, if Matty's comments were ultimately the catalyst to get Oasis back together, I'm not questioning it. Thanks so much for watching. What did you think of this video? Are there any other Oasis feuds I haven't mentioned here? Did I overlook any important details from the feuds that are mentioned in this video? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to watch part 1 if you haven't already, and as always, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you're new here. This has been Sound and Vision, and I'll see you next time.